Is that your favorite superhero?
No.
Is Nightwing your favorite superhero?
No.
Is I could just go through the list of all the superheroes I know and see if I could get Aquaman.
No.
No.
I like all those
Wolverine?
three, but no.
That, by the way, is
I don't really have a favorite superhero. I do
this
have a
could have gone on
favorite
forever.
superhero team, though.
oh, your favorite superhero team? It is
Yeah.
definitely not Teen Titans.
No, though they're fine.
Yep, but I remember you told me this once actually, and they're like the ones in the future.
Yeah.
and I cannot remember who they are.
The Legion of Superheroes.
Oh, yeah, Legion
from
of
the
Superheroes.
31st century.
Yeah.
So they were teenage superheroes, and they're living in the future. So you got superheroes and science fiction put together. What more do you want?
As long as there's dinosaurs.
Is there a movie yet?
No, but there was a TV show, an animated TV show that was
Oh, okay.
quite good.
That is Erica Olson, who is
Hey,
the
you got
director
it right.
of. She's our co-host today, and here at Catholic Answers, she's the director of all things event related.
That's true.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Thanks for getting my last name right.
Oh, you're welcome, Erica
Yeah,
Olson.
our president in front of 600 people at the conference said the old last name, like on stage.
You just say the old
I
last
was
name, so
like-
we'll get rid of.
Women do
I just,
sometimes
like-
Santana.
change their last names.
They
so it
do.
makes it
They
a little
do.
tricky.
No, it's fine. I don't mind either, really.
It's just it's the change of your name when you got married is it just seems extreme going from Santana to Olson.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's so I don't know.
I don't know.
Culturally different. Now you're Mrs. Olson.
Well, and Santana was so catchy, I think, that people just,
Yeah, right. Erica
like-
Santana. It sounds very right. It's very catchy.
yeah, it's very catchy. It's
Play
famous.
rock guitar or something.
Yeah.
For those of you who are not
some sort of rock
familiar
star.
with Catholic Answers is an apostolate whose name is very apropos, actually. We're entirely dedicated to answering questions about the Catholic faith. We try to do so in a way that is rooted in the teaching of the church very, very firmly, rooted in the catechism of the Catholic Church, rooted in the teaching of the magisterium. We try not to just give our opinions. We're not an opinion. I mean, we have opinions and we share our opinions about things, but the main thing, people want to know, what does the Catholic Church teach?
And we don't want to confuse our opinions with the teaching of the church.
Exactly, yeah.
We might give our opinions where the church has room for opinion,
Which is a lot, actually.
which is a lot actually, but we don't want to portray our opinions as if they're church teaching, because they're not. They're just opinions.
Right, and we are. You can find us at Catholic.com, and we're just outside of San Diego, California, and we do pretty much every way you can answer a question about the Catholic faith. We try to be there, and all the online ways.
You mean like someone could actually call in or something and ask a question?
Oh yeah,
Could they do that right now?
They could, as a matter of fact. If you have any question at all about the Catholic faith, we're happy to take your call. 888-318-7884 is the number. If you prefer the spelled version, it's 888-31 Truth. And we do television and radio. We do book publishing, online stuff. What am I missing? Conferences, cruises. what else? Speaking events.
People can call in on our apologist line and ask questions off the air as well as on the air.
Email, regular mail. People could send us we still do regular
Twitter.
mail. Twitter.
Magazine.
It goes on and on. We have a magazine, Catholic Answers Magazine. So we're delighted to be on the Radio Maria airwaves. Thank you to all of you who supported Radio Maria last week during the Mariathon. I hope that was successful. I don't personally have word on it yet, but because we don't...
That's the best play on words.
What?
A Mariathon.
Yeah, Mariathon.
That's
Radio
awesome.
Maria, Mariathon.
I love it.
And the thing about us is we don't own TV stations, radio stations, all that kind of. We just make the content, and if the providers want to provide it, they can. And so you got to support those local radio stations.
Thon is an interesting suffix.
A thon?
Yeah.
I wonder where that comes from.
It comes from marathon. Oh. And you know where marathon comes from?
Greece, right?
That's right. It's a place in Greece.
And the guy had to run.
The guy had to run to like give a message, right? And he ran 26 points.
We won.
What is it? How long is a marathon? 26.2?
Yeah, 26.2 miles. Yeah. And what was the battle? Anybody remember the battle?
I don't recall that. I do recall going to Olympia, though, and walking an Olympiad where you have it around the track at Olympia in Greece.
Yeah.
That was cool.
Okay, here's a little trivia for you that I know for some reason. I don't know why. You know, in the ancient world, one of the biggest supporters of the Olympics, you know, they had the ancient Olympics.
Oh, yeah, they were huge. They even dated events based on which Olympiad it occurred in.
Yeah. Herod the Great, he gave a ton of money to the Olympics because he wanted to be Herod the Great. He wanted people to think of him as Herod the Great. So he built a lot of things, and he was a big supporter of the Olympics.
Fun fact. How do you come across fun facts like that?
I do not remember where I got that. I remember
Josephus
reading about
would
it.
likely
Someone
discuss that.
Really?
Yeah, he discusses a lot of things that Herod did. I don't recall him discussing that, but he may well have. He's one of our best sources of information about the life of Herod the Great
And Josephus
and
was
the death of Herod the Great.
right. And now they found the burial place of Herod the Great. Right? Didn't I see that? Did they found that? Okay, so Josephus
was a Jewish historian. He was born in the year AD 37, so just like 4 years after the crucifixion. And he was from the priestly class. He was from a priestly family. So he himself was a priest, one of actually several thousand Jewish priests at the time. And he investigated different schools of Jewish thought, the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the Essenes, and then he participated in the war of the AD 60s against the Romans, where he was one of the rebel leaders because he was from the priestly aristocracy. He was given charge of an army in Galilee, and he had these other competing commanders who were kind of trying to undermine each other, which was one of the reasons they lost the war.
yeah, that'll do it.
But then he got holed up in a cave with a bunch of other soldiers, and they decided to kill themselves rather than surrender to the Romans. But since you weren't supposed to commit suicide as a Jew, they arranged this kind of lottery system where one guy would kill another guy who would kill another guy who would, and so forth.
Right.
And it got down to two guys, just Josephus and one other guy. This is actually a math problem called the Josephus problem.
Okay.
You can watch videos about this on YouTube. But it got down to Josephus and one other guy, and he said, let's not kill ourselves, okay? And so he survived, and then he went over. He got captured by the Romans, and suddenly announced that he'd had a divine revelation that Vespasian, the general in command, and his son Titus were going to become Roman emperors.
Which is weird because they did.
They did. Yeah.
Both become
And
Roman
so
emperors.
when that happened, when that started to happen, he got this favorable position. He was there at the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. Titus used him as a negotiator to try to talk to the rebels holed up in the city. And then after the war, in the 70s, he wrote an Aramaic history of the Jewish war, which he then in the 90s had translated into Greek, and he also wrote several other things. But his biggest book is a book called Antiquities of the Jews, which is basically a history of the Jewish people all the way from Genesis down to his own day. And so he's one of our best sources of historical figures, Jewish historical figures of the time.
Isn't it wonderful that this whole story gives us one of the best sources we have outside of the Bible for the very period that we have? Well, that the Lord was alive, for one thing, so we have our greatest interest in.
Right, and he mentions Jesus a couple of times.
Yeah, so we get it just the divine purpose, I guess, working out there to make sure that we have sources outside of the Bible that give us an insight into the Bible, really.
Now, you were mentioning the life of Herod the Great, and I mentioned the death of Herod the Great.
Okay, yes.
And he did some not so great things.
Like killing his family?
Well, yeah. He killed a number of family members who he thought were plotting against him. So it's like no surprise. I mean, he even had his own sons executed because he thought they were like conspiring to take the throne from him.
Right.
And so it's no surprise that, when he hears the King of the Jews has just been born,
Right.
that he would go after that with the slaughter of the innocents. So that
Kill the babies.
really fits what we know about his character. Also, allegedly, at least it's not clear if this is really true, but it's in some accounts, Caesar Augustus is reported to have quipped that it's better to be Herod's pig than Herod's son. Because as a Jew, Herod couldn't eat pork, and so his pig would be safe, but his son would not.
Gives you an idea of the quality of the man.
Yeah, but then he got struck down by this very mysterious disease that they weren't familiar with in the ancient world. It seems to have been some kind of gastrointestinal disease, and seems to have also been coupled with like gangrene or something. It was really nasty, and they called it Herod's complaint because they didn't know what else to call it.
Yeah.
And as he was dying, and he was in a lot of agony, he commanded that leading men from all over Israel be like placed in this hippodrome. And when he died, they were all to be killed so that every family would have cause to mourn upon his death.
Man, what a guy.
Yeah. And then he died,
maniac.
but they didn't carry out the order. And so those guys got to live after all, which was great.
Sometimes not following orders is the right
Yeah.
move.
But then there was a second victim of Herod's complaint in the ancient world, too. His grandson, Herod Agrippa, who we read about in the book of Acts. If you read Acts chapter 12, after Herod Agrippa kills James, son of Zebedee, and tries to kill Peter, Luke records the story of Herod Agrippa's death, which Josephus also records. And he also seems to have been struck down by Herod's complaint.
Do modern scientists have any...
that was going to be my question. Is modern medicine investigating what
I haven't
happened to be now?
I haven't looked into that thoroughly, but I can check it out and report back.
Yeah, I'd love to know what disease he actually has. Like, we probably know what it is now.
The problem is it may have been multifactorial. It may have been several things at once because some of the symptoms are really weird, and some of them are a little delicate to go into on family radio.
But we didn't know that about
his grandson, did you say?
Grandson, yeah.
I mean, that must have been some kind of genetic disease
Or
then.
divine intervention,
Or something. Yeah,
which is how
yeah.
Luke portrays it.
Okay. I'll give it that.
Once again, this is Cy Kellett, your host, and you are listening to Catholic Answers Today on Radio Maria US, a Christian voice in your home. We're talking with Jimmy Akin and Eric Olson about anything to do with the Catholic faith. You're welcome to call 888-318-7884 if you have a question about the Catholic faith. That's what we do here at Catholic Answers. We answer those questions. You look like you were going to say something, Erica.
No, sorry. I was talking to people in the radio room.
In the booth.
I was making faces to our staff.
See, I call that the booth, but they've told me that's disrespectful, that I should be calling it the control room.
Oh.
They're not
Mission
booth.
control.
Maybe mission control would
I
be
like
even
mission
better.
Mission control?
Yeah.
How do you guys feel about being called mission control in there?
We're getting thumbs up, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, mission control.
Hey, we had a I was talking at the top of the show about that we do pretty much everything you can do to try to answer questions about the Catholic faith. And one of the things we do is we have an annual conference where people come from all over the country, all around the world, to talk about a topic. And this year we did faith and science. And I want to ask you both about that, about because it was just a week ago. Well, no, is it? About
a week
10 days ago, maybe.
Yeah.
We wrapped it up. And wonderful speakers and all that. Jimmy, you were one of the speakers there. You were the organizer. Have you recovered?
Erica was.
I think
Erica,
I
yeah.
am. I think I'm finally feeling like myself. Last week I took every morning off.
So many details.
There's a lot of detail that people don't realize.
And especially,
what
we
it
had,
takes.
you mentioned 600 people there at one time, but we actually had like almost 1,000 show
Yeah,
up
we had
overall,
we had almost 1,000 people, which is capacity.
which means lots of details because there's multiple
Yes.
details per person, and then you multiply that by 1,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have thousands of
Because
details.
you have different kinds of tickets that you're selling. You have different receptions that you're hosting. I had to organize food for a bunch of different receptions. Jimmy did square dancing, and
Yeah.
we had to coordinate his audio. There's a lot of little details that people don't realize go into an event.
Luckily, you had a very, very good MC. And then
That would be you,
He's all
Si.
right.
Oh, he's all right. Now, I want to ask you, because I'm going to ask Jimmy about his talk, but I want to ask you this. It seemed like there were a lot of young people there this year. Do you think it was because faith and science is one of the it's almost like one of the crucibles they have to pass through, is the intellectual challenge of people who say science has moved us past faith. You don't need faith anymore. Science handles all that. What was your impression from the young people you talked to?
You know, I didn't get to talk to a lot of people.
Oh, sorry.
Well, just very briefly.
You are taking care of all of the back end stuff that's happening during. But I think that young people today, especially, I mean, it's been my experience in this diocese anyways, that young people today are really exploring their faith a lot more. They're demanding more answers.
Yes.
And trying to catechize themselves a lot more than I think in the past. So I feel like...
So they're like, they got to be proactive.
Like, they have to be proactive. They have to go out there, find it. People are following us because of that. I think people are getting more involved with our events and reading our literature a lot more.
Right.
I just think young adults are more involved.
Yeah, it was cool to see parents with little babies. You know, like they came for the weekend with their little baby. I mean, the Catholic radio is making a difference in that regard, I think. Like, it's like people maybe didn't get catechesis or they didn't learn the faith, and then they just listened to Catholic radio and they're picking up, oh, wait a second, there's something to this, something that has real intellectual power that I should listen to.
Yeah. No, I mean, from my experience anyways, just personal, I didn't get catechized properly.
Yeah,
you know, I never, I didn't even go through the RCIA program when I was an adult and I wanted to get confirmed. I had all my other sacraments, and so all I needed was confirmation. And I was told by the church, well, you're already really involved, because I was helping out in the church and stuff already, and said, just take the confirmation course, which is like an eight lesson course, and you're good. So I didn't have to go through the RCIA program, which after the fact, I actually became an RCIA sponsor and went through the class with her.
Learned the faith.
And I learned it. I was like, why didn't I go through this class before? This is great. Not all RCIA classes are like that from what I've heard, but mine was great, or my friends was great. But going through just a simple confirmation course didn't really give me the proper background. So I started listening to our shows and Catholic radio and reading the magazine and going to talks. I didn't go to big conferences like this, but I went to parish talks. They'd bring in different speakers. You know, I got to listen to Matt Fradd at A Theology on Tap. You know, things like that. And that's where I sort of started gathering my information.
Yeah. That's Theology on Tap is another one of those things. Like,
those are great.
That have just and then you think of these. Now they have Focus, the Fellowship of Catholic University Students. That more and more there are things available to answer people's questions, and boy, do we need it. I thought I was struck by even some pretty well catechized Catholics at the conference who I remember one of the speakers mentioned Georges Lemaitre, the priest
from Belgium,
and he discovered or what would you say? Not discovered,
formulated.
But he formulated the idea of the Big Bang, and he's a Catholic priest. And somebody said to me after that talk, said, Catholics should tell this. Like, we should let people know that a priest is the one who came up with the Big Bang Theory. And we're like, well, we do tell people that. But you just have to keep telling it over and over again, because for that person, it was very impressive. Like, well, we can't be anti-science then. If we came up with, you know, like you kind of use the we because it's Catholic priests and we're Catholic. If we came up with the big, and then you mentioned people like Gregor Mendel, you know, did you know modern genetics was discovered by a Catholic priest? And then people start to see, oh, well, we're not.
And
it's not all Galileo.
You do have to keep repeating, because I'll tell you, I'm not a theologian. I didn't go and study theology for 5-6 years or anything. I learned by osmosis, listening to Jimmy talk or listening to Trent Horn give a talk, you know. And until I was putting together this conference, I didn't know a lot of this.
Yeah.
And so I myself was learning a bunch of stuff just putting together this conference. And so I know that that's a lot of people out there are more like me than like Jimmy.
Yes, right.
We all know different things.
I mean, we know
I don't know how to
things.
do all the negotiations with the hotels.
Well,
and
there
things
you go.
Like that you do.
We do different things, and so I felt like I was learning a ton leading into this. You know, I didn't know that half of the scientists. I didn't know that the Vatican had a science. I guess what would you call it? An observatory.
In fact, they have a branch observatory just over the mountains in Arizona.
there you go.
There you go. Well, and then
By the way, speaking of astronomy and George Lemaitre,
Yeah.
he's going to hopefully be getting a little bit more love. I mean, he's well known in the scientific community, but there's another astronomer who was kind of working at the same time, an American named Edwin Hubble,
Yes,
who is the one the telescope's named after.
right, that's how we all know him.
Yeah, and he was involved in measuring the rate of expansion
Okay.
of the universe, at the rate at which galaxies are receding from each other, and that's kind of known as Hubble's constant. Well, Hubble wasn't the only one involved in that. Lemaitre was too, and so there's a movement right now to in the scientific community to rename Hubble's constant as the Hubble-Lemaitre constant.
Oh, wonderful. That's wonderful. So now, I thought you did an important service, Jimmy, at the conference, because one of the things that is a great sticking point for people, or just a kind of an intellectual hurdle, is, okay, but you have this Georges Lemaitre and you have all these others who have given us the Big Bang Theory. That doesn't sound like what I read in the book of Genesis. And that's what you dedicated yourself to,
Yeah.
helping us understand how
science and scripture can fit together.
Yeah.
And the way I did it, I hope people will check out this talk when we have our conference talks available. But what I did was I said, let's forget about modern science. Let's not worry about that. Let's just read Genesis carefully.
Yes.
And see what clues it gives us. Is it really trying to give us chronological information? This happened, then this happened, then this other thing happened, or is it doing something else? And if you read Genesis carefully, even without a background in modern science, you notice things that would have leapt out at the ancient audience,
Yes.
like God created the day and the night on day 1, but the sun isn't created until day 4.
Yeah.
Well, the ancients knew that it's the sun, the presence of the sun, that makes it day. I mean, they knew that as well as we do. You don't need Edwin Hubble and George Lemaitre to tell you that.
No, you could just sit around for 24 hours and that'll become clear to you.
Yeah, and in fact, as I showed in my talk, the ancients not only knew this, they talked about it.
Yeah.
They talked about the fact that the sun isn't created till the 4th day, and what does that mean, and what does that imply? And you had early Christian figures like St. Augustine and Origen pointing out that this means the text isn't really trying to communicate strict chronology to us. It's telling us what the Creator did. He made all these things.
Yeah.
God really did all this stuff. But it's not trying to tell us the exact details of how it happened.
I found your grid very interesting, and you won't. I mean, it's impossible to do too much grid on the radio, but you matched up day 1, the day and night,
Right.
with day 4, the sun. They not mentioned sun and moon, but
So just briefly, what Genesis says is that when God created the heavens and the earth, they were without form and void. In Hebrew, those words rhyme. Tohu means formless,
Yeah.
and bohu means emptiness or
Yes.
void. And so the world was formless and empty, but that's not really a good place for a human to live, in a formless, empty place.
Right.
And so God has these two things he needs to address in his creation. He needs to address the formlessness problem. He needs to address the emptiness problem. And so on the first 3 days, he addresses the tohu, or formlessness problem, by giving the world structure. He separates light from darkness. He separates the waters above from the waters below, so you have sky and sea. Then he separates the waters below from each other, so the dry land appears. So now on the first 3 days, he's given the world structure, but it's still empty. It's still bohu. So he then goes back over the same 3 realms in the same order and populates them. So on day 4, corresponding to the light and the darkness, he populates the day and the night with the sun, the moon, and the stars. So now the day and the night are not empty. On day 5, corresponding to the sky and the sea on the second day, he populates the sky and the sea with birds and fish. And then on the last day of the 6 of creation, he's got the dry land left. It's still empty. So he populates the dry land with the land animals and man. And then it's all done. So on the 7th day, he rests. And this structure has been, again, noted for centuries. In St. Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologia, for example, he calls the first 3 days the work of distinction, because God distinguished
Yes.
things between, like, distinguished
and dark.
the light from the darkness and the waters above from the waters below and so forth. And then the second 3 days, Aquinas calls the days of adornment, where he goes over the realms he distinguished, and then God populates them by adorning them with inhabitants, the sun, the moon, and the stars, the birds and the fish, and the land animals and man.
So what's fascinating to me is, well, a couple things are fascinating to me about that. One, the church always thought about Genesis this way. Not everybody always did, but from the very earliest years of the church, people were clear that this is not simply
Some people were clear.
Yeah, some people, right. So this wasn't when modern ideas about the timing of all these things came out, it wasn't as if the church had to say, well, we've never thought of that before, because clearly it had been thought of for centuries and centuries.
Yeah.
This idea that Genesis the early chapters of Genesis are presenting us with concepts, not necessarily chronologies.
Theology rather than chronology.
Theology rather than chronology.
Yeah, well, after 2,000 years, Catholics have had time to think of a lot of things. I'm always kind of amazed when someone coming from a non-Catholic perspective thinks they've discovered a new objection to the faith, and it's okay, Mr. Catholic, tell me how you're going to answer this Bible verse.
Right.
It's like, that verse has been around for 2,000 years.
Yeah,
We've had a chance to think about it.
Which is great. I mean, and one of the great things I think about being Catholic is it's not just we've had a chance to think about it, but we have this great body of writing, including magisterial writing. We have creeds, we have explanations of creeds. So you can go to things like the Catechism, and you could go back to the catechisms of the Middle Ages. You can use the modern catechisms. You can use what is contemporary, the Catechism of the Catholic Church, promulgated by Pope John Paul II. And it's there. So I think that it's so helpful to say, well, you have a question about the Catholic faith? Well, look here. We have an answer, and it may have developed over centuries. That answer, it
More
might
refined
be
answer,
or refined. It might be right there in the Bible. Here's why we teach what we teach on divorce, for example. Well, comes right out of the mouth of Jesus. That's a very we consider him pretty reliable. So that's something I just I sometimes think that's one of the great gifts we have, is that we're not lacking for answers. But I guess a person who works for Catholic Answers would think that that's a great gift. Maybe I have a bias in that regard. 888-318-7884 is our number, 888-318-7884. Jimmy, just before I move on, your general impression, I don't want you to do an impression now, just in case you're going to be tempted, but your general impression of the conference on faith and science. Like,
I couldn't do an impression of an entire conference.
Hey, I'm a conference. What'd you think about what you heard there and about how people reacted to it?
I thought it was good. I thought people really enjoyed it. Got a lot of positive feedback, both at the conference and subsequently. You mentioned how young people were attending, and there were a lot of young people there. One thing that I noticed on Twitter just recently, I think you saw this, I think I saw you liked this on your Twitter feed, but so there were a pair of young women who were there who were making like a documentary, little mini video documentary a day about the conference, and so they have their day 1 video, their day 2 video. They're putting them up now.
I gotta see that.
I need to join Twitter.
That's cool. I got to go back and see. So if I search like Catholic Answers Conference or something,
I'll send you a link.
Okay, all right, and maybe we could get that on our social media too. Because we have a Facebook page. You just go to Facebook and search Catholic Answers, and I think we're the first ones that come up. And you can just click on our Facebook page, or you can follow us on Twitter. Is just hashtag.
I think we're on.
What is it? No, it's at Catholic Answers.
I'm not sure what I only know my Twitter handle.
Wait, here comes Nick. Nick, our at Catholic.com. Okay, all right, you can look there. Because that'd be interesting. I really want to see those little documentaries.
Yeah, that'd be great.
People are brilliant. And so that's one of the great things about social media, too. This stuff can just be used and reused and presented in a million different ways. Again, this is Cy Kellett. I am your host. You're listening to Catholic Answers today on Radio Maria US, a Christian voice in your home. We're talking with Eric Olson, our co-host, and with Jimmy Akin, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. And you're welcome to call us. 888-318-7884 is the number. Catholic Answers is, we call it an apostolate. We could get into what that word means, but basically we're just an organization within the Catholic Church, but we're not associated with a particular diocese. We're not an official organ of
yeah.
the Catholic Church. We're lay people for the most part who have come together to try to answer questions about the Catholic faith. You can find out all about us at Catholic.com. And we do have a caller, and I would like to go to the call and take that question if you all don't mind.
Absolutely.
Calls are welcome here on any aspect of the Catholic faith. You're always welcome to call 888-318-7884. Let's go to Diane in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, who found us on Facebook this morning. Diane, welcome. Your question for anybody, but probably I'm going to guess Jimmy's going to take your question.
Hi. Okay. I guess hi, Jimmy Akin. I listen to you guys relatively frequently when I get online. So my question is, I'm a statement. I'm a cradle Catholic, and when I was 14, so that was when the new Mass and Novus Ordo came in, and so for almost like 50 years now, I have been attending that. At breakfast yesterday, my husband and I were with a friend after Mass, and we were just talking about a lot of things and how the church had changed. And this friend had said they changed the formula of the Episcopal rite of consecration, and then for bishops, and then changed the formula for the ordination for priests. And I said, okay, well, I went to look it up. I do a lot of, reading, and it is, in fact, changed. My question is, why was it changed, and does it, or how does it affect the validity of, like, I've gone to confession for 50 years. Am I really forgiven? Is there any kind of question or concern that I should have that bishops and priests aren't really valid, and then my sacraments, confession, and communion isn't valid? That put up some worry. Really,
all right. Well, let's let Jimmy address it, Diane. Thank you.
This is a claim that you hear sometimes, and I really have to say that people who spread this claim are doing a disservice to others, because it's true that the rites of sacraments change periodically. That's something that happens all the way down through church history. Periodically, prayers get revised, language changes, new theological insights are brought out, and the church has never had a single rite for any sacrament, not since the Last Supper. I mean, in the early church, a number of different liturgical traditions developed. In fact, there are 5 major families of liturgical traditions that have always been part of the church, have always been in use, and they're all valid. And so the idea that there has to be some single formula used or a sacrament's not valid is completely wrong. The church has always had multiple rites that are in use for different sacraments, even baptism, and that's something that is part of the church's heritage. It's part of the church's patrimony. It's one of the things that God willed for his church. He didn't will for us to all use exactly the same words in the administration of every sacrament. He wanted his church to have different liturgical rites, to be enriched by the different cultures where the gospel spread. And so God knew that this was going to happen. It's part of his plan. And so he didn't make the validity of the sacraments contingent on any single formula. As long as the basic meaning behind the sacrament is expressed, it's going to be valid. And so as in your case, Diane, it stirred up concerns on your part when you started hearing someone say, ooh, there's been a change here, therefore stuff's invalid or maybe invalid. It stirs up unnecessary concern and at times scruples on people's part when people start spreading this claim, because the premise that, well, there have been changes in the Mass or in the rite of ordination or in whatever. Well, that's true. There have always been changes. That's why we're not celebrating all of the liturgy in Aramaic. Language changes over time. English didn't even exist, and Latin wasn't even the first language the church used. It's always used a diversity of languages, including Aramaic and Greek and Latin and other native languages as well. So the premise is true. The first premise is true, that there are changes that take place in the liturgy from time to time. But the second premise, that therefore that means that stuff has been invalidated and that sacraments aren't being legitimately celebrated, that's a false premise. As long as the basic meaning of the sacrament is being communicated by the words used to express it, the sacrament's going to be valid.
Diane, does that help you?
Yeah, I just to add one more thing is like why was it changed at that period of time? Like I noticed the
Okay.
Do you mean after that period of time, meaning after Second Vatican Council?
Yes.
Is that what?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So the answer is twofold. Number one, the liturgy is constantly in revision, and at least in small ways. I mean, every pope tends to tweak something about the liturgy. So the idea that there's anything unusual about a change occurring is not special. This is constantly happening. Pope Francis made changes. Pope Benedict made changes. John Paul II made changes.
John the 23rd.
John the 23rd, Paul VI, all of the Pius XII, all of the recent popes, except John Paul I, who died in 30 days. All of the recent popes have made changes in the liturgy. Now, sometimes the changes are bigger. And that happened after the Second Vatican Council. And the reason for that was because of the Second Vatican Council. It wasn't just the Pope who weighed in on this. The bishops of the world got together and said, you know, we'd like to recover some forms that the liturgy used to use, like back in the 400s and the 300s, that have been lost. We'd like to reintroduce those into the liturgy. We'd also like to streamline a few things that have built up in the liturgy over the centuries, you know, kind of like barnacles on the hull of a ship. They build up over time. Every so often you want a resimplification to get back to the core of things. So between the desire of the world's bishops to streamline some things that had built up over the ages and also the desire to recover some things that had been lost over the ages, those twin desires produced a larger than normal change during the reign of Paul II, but that's the basic reason. It's simply a confluence of historical factors that made it a natural point to do a bigger review of the liturgy because there was an ecumenical council that had just met.
Diane, thank you very, very much for that call and for those questions. We appreciate it. And I'm going to, let's see. Oh, we got more callers. So we're going to get to.
Do it.
Did you, when you said you did that RCIA thing, mm-hmm. Are people coming into the church, do you think they're aware of this, that there's this kind of tension, I guess, that followed the Second Vatican Council, or does that not come up? Like it seemed, I guess it
didn't come up with the group that I was a part of.
Yeah, that's going to vary from group to group.
Yeah, I think it varies from group to group. I think there's some groups who are just in love with the church, and they want to be a part of it, and so they're just focused on becoming part of the church. And then I think there's other groups that dive deeper into history or something like that, different documents that they want to learn about, and that presents a different conversation, so it takes the group in a different direction. So I just think it depends on the group.
Fair enough.
I think it's so interesting that Jimmy said something, though, because you said that the liturgy, that the popes make changes, and that's fine, but it's what is said during the sacrament. And it's funny that you just bring that up, because I was just talking to my friend who attempted to baptize her child, and they said bless instead of baptize, and so the validity of the baptism was
who
questioned.
Said blessed?
It was a deacon, and I thought it was so interesting. So
the deacon was intending to baptize, but used the wrong word.
He and I don't think he did it maliciously, obviously. I think he was just nervous. I don't know.
He wasn't twirling his mustache when he did it.
But the validity came into question of this baptism. So the baby is getting
a conditional
officially baptized. I think he was yesterday. But it's just funny that it's really, the change can happen in the liturgy, but you have to say the right words.
Well, you have to communicate the essence of the sacrament,
Right.
in this case, baptism.
Right.
But it's not surprising that people would, and it's unfortunate, but it's not surprising that people would have a word slip like that. Linguists have measured that phenomenon, and it seems that we accidentally substitute the wrong word about once every 1,000 words. We have some kind of speech flaw like that. Just a given word will just pop right into our front and we'll say it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm at like 1 in 50.
I know.
I think way
I know I
more
do
frequent
it.
than 1 in 1,000.
I do it when I'm talking, and I do it as I'm typing too. I'll be thinking of the word I want to type, and then I type a completely different word, just like automatically.
Yeah.
So I could see that, but
I've done that. I also do the thing where I start one word and then I finish with the other.
word.
It's like my brain is already.
I tend
moving
to
on.
grab a word that I'm preparing to use and insert it into the word I'm currently typing.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, that's exactly.
It's also difficult when it happens if I'm creating choreography spontaneously in a square dance or something, and I'm setting up for a given move that I'm not ready to call yet, but because I'm thinking about the move I'm setting up for, that gets into the exit buffer somehow and it comes out of my mouth.
does it create like a crash in the
dancing? or suddenly incomprehension.
Bunch of broken ankles.
They're not in the right formation to do what I just asked them to do.
In addition to being a apologist here, a world-renowned apologist, Jimmy is also a square dance caller and a caller for other forms of dance.
Right.
Morris dancing,
English country, contra, line, things like that.
You're listening to Catholic Answers today on Radio Maria, a Christian voice in your home. We're talking about whatever you want to talk about because we're taking calls today. 888-318-7884 is our number. I'm going to go to another call, but I just want to ask you if you guys were aware of this because you were talking about typing. Children don't know what typewriters are today.
I know.
Why
Did you know
would
they? They have no clue what a typewriter is. I don't know why that. You both seem very comfortable with that. That freaks me out. It's like a typewriter. It's like so big. Like, how are they going to know all the cartoons?
People don't know. Children don't know. I showed my 15-year-old niece a cassette player, like a Walkman.
She didn't know what a cassette player was?
A Walkman cassette player, and she was like, "What is that?"
It's so funny because I mean the cassette is like so like when we were growing up. Okay, there's the cassette. Yeah, but it only lasted for 15, 20 years as an actual mode that people were using. Went from the 8-track.
My dad's
even
car.
remember the 8-track?
Okay, so I was just past the 8-track age.
Yeah.
But my dad's car still had an 8-track player.
Yeah.
We didn't use it. We just used the radio, and he had a tape deck, I think, installed or something. But it had the 8-track player, but we didn't use it. So I do know what an 8-track is, but I never used one.
Why would you guess it's called an 8-track?
Because it only has 8 tracks.
There you go. It has 8 tracks of information on,
I totally
on the tape.
I've never looked inside an 8-track though. I don't know how it works. Is it one continuous?
It's like a magnetic tape. It's
just like the cassette, but bigger, right?
Yeah.
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 See, I know about it.
Let's go to Haas, and I don't know why I just derailed the conversation like that, but let's go to Haas in Norfolk, Nebraska, who finds us on YouTube today. Thanks for watching on YouTube, Haas. Your question for Jimmy.
Yeah, Jimmy, I have a question about the perpetual virginity of Mary. I'm just trying to understand it so I can explain it better. So to clarify, God cannot create a rock that he can't lift because that would contradict his nature. He can't make a married bachelor. He can't do contradiction.
Right.
But he can make a woman give birth that's still a virgin. I'm just trying to explain it because people have asked me.
Okay.
And I'm like, I believe this because it's a dogma, but other than that, I can't explain it.
Okay. So you're quite correct that God can't do things that involve logical contradictions because they don't make any sense. You can say things like God created a four-sided triangle, but that's just verbal gibberish. That's just word salad. It doesn't mean anything. The idea of a four-sided triangle is logically contradictory. And so, I mean, you can imagine things that kind of combine a square and a triangle, like a four-sided pyramid, the pyramids in Egypt. But those are pyramids. That's not a triangle.
Right,
a triangle, by definition, has 3 angles, and that means it also has 3 sides. So it can't have 4 sides. So God's able, philosophers and theologians would say, to do anything that's logically possible, anything that does not involve a logical contradiction, like a four-sided triangle or a married bachelor or things like that. But a virgin mother is not in that category. There is not a logical contradiction there. A virgin means has not had sexual relations. Mother means female who has given birth to or conceived a child. And in fact, there are virgin mothers out there in nature. God does this all the time, just naturally. It's a process called, as you would expect from Greek, parthenogenesis. Parthene is the word for virgin. Genesis means origin, and so, or birth. And so there are virgin births out in nature. They occur in various species where you have either an absence or a shortage of males, and some species are able to keep themselves going by just a female conceiving an offspring. And the female is always going to be itself female in these species because there's no genetic component coming in from a male. But this exists in lizards and certain kinds of lizards, certain kind of worms, certain kind of fish, things like that. So it's quite possible to have a life form that is female and that has spawned a child but didn't do so by having sex. So that's something we actually see in nature. Now, parthenogenesis does not naturally occur in humans. Our species does not work like that. And so in order to have a human female who gives birth to a child without having sexual relations, you either have to do some kind of fancy technological thing, like in vitro fertilization plus embryo transfer, or you need a miracle. And since they didn't have in vitro fertilization and embryo transfer in the first century, we know this was a miracle. Also, because Jesus was a male rather than a female, he needed to get that Y chromosome from somewhere, and that means that God supplied genetic material for the conception of Jesus. But because God is omnipotent and able to actualize any logically possible state of affairs, it is logically possible for the creator of the universe to create some genetic material in Mary's body that would lead to the conception of a child even without her having sex. If God can create all the matter in the universe, he can certainly create the tiny amount of genetic matter needed for Mary to conceive a child without a human father being involved.
Haas, does that make sense to you that it's not, even though we don't see it in nature in humans, it's not a logical contradiction?
Well, I was making a category here where, like, I was just misunderstanding virginity. It's the way it was conceived, or Jesus was conceived, is how it is. Am I correct in that statement?
Well, he was conceived virginally, meaning from a mother who was a virgin, meaning his mother did not have sexual relations in producing him.
Correct. Okay. I agree.
Okay.
So it's just like the reptiles in Jurassic Park, where they're talking about they can sometimes do this. And
that's a natural example of parthenogenesis, but as we said, it doesn't naturally occur in humans. So in the first century, it would have taken a miracle.
Correct. Okay. Right. Okay. That it clears it up. Thank you. I can't wait to share that with people.
Thank you, Haas. Thank you very, very much.
Gospel of Parthenogenesis.
Yeah. No, but
I'm so glad that Haas mentions the Jurassic Park dinosaurs, because that's what I think of when Jimmy says
nature finds a way.
When Jimmy says that there are other instances in nature where this happens, he's thinking insects and other animals. But
I'm thinking nonfiction. Yeah.
You're thinking.
But I'm thinking in Jurassic Park, the dinosaurs did it.
Why can't God? Well, a lot of
in fact, the premise of Jurassic Park, where they take DNA from dinosaurs via insects trapped in amber,
yes.
and then they create in a lab. So that would also be, that might even be I mean, and then they incubate the eggs in a living form that was like a frog or something.
Yeah.
So that would have been parthenogenesis as well, but of the technological variety.
Oh. See?
But what about people who say, Jimmy, because I think we do hear this, that, well, this idea of virgin birth, this was common in the myths of the ancient world. This just shows that they were mythologizing the life of Jesus.
Yeah, it's really not common.
Okay.
You hear claims like this, but it's actually not. Like examples that get pointed to, for example, Hercules.
Okay.
Hercules was not born of a virgin. Hercules' dad was Zeus. And Zeus, in Greek mythology, was a notorious philanderer.
He was a rascal, that
went
Zeus.
around,
Yes.
sometimes took the form of a bull,
swan.
or swan or whatever, and would impregnate lots of human women through sexual intercourse.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay, Hercules had a divine father and a human mother, but there was no parthenogenesis here. His mother was not a virgin. She had sex with Zeus.
Yeah, I see. Oh, so people will translate that. Well, Jesus had a divine father. Hercules had a divine father. See, this is the same story, but it's not the same story at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's also the other thing about Hercules, though, in that he never existed.
Well, I was going to point that out as well. We can date exactly, to the year approximately when Jesus was born. There's no way to do that with Hercules. Hercules was not a historical figure. He's a legendary figure.
Got it. So a lot of this mythicism is based on ideas that are themselves false about ancient myths.
Yeah, people who are not studying their mythology closely enough.
Right. They'll go, oh, this happened resurrection happened all the time. Like, and they'll mention Horus or somebody like that.
Yeah, Horus wasn't resurrected. Horus came back. So that's from Egyptian mythology.
Yeah.
And Horus was one of a number of Egyptian gods. His wife was Isis. His brother was Set. And Set murdered Osiris. Not Horus. The one who died is Osiris. His son was Horus.
Yeah.
And so Set murders Osiris and chops his body up and scatters it all over the place. And his wife then collects the different body parts, except for one which she can't find, so she makes a golden replacement for it, and then reanimates him. This is Isis. Reanimates Osiris through her magic, so he's now like this zombie king, who's always portrayed in Egyptian art as like green because he's dead.
Yeah.
But he's animated now, so he's not resurrected. He's the zombie king of the underworld.
Oh, what a job. Wouldn't you love that job, Zombie King of the Underworld? Why are you making that face, Erica? It's a gross story. Is that why?
No, I just think it's laughable to me. I don't know why.
Don't laugh too loud or you might get thrown to the Eater of Souls, which was this kind of crocodile-like figure they had in the Egyptian afterlife.
Yeah.
I keep thinking about movies, and I'm like, it's like RoboCop.
Like RoboCop, or Frankenstein.
Yeah, Frankenstein.
Right. Resuscitation and zombification are not what happened to Jesus.
No.
But I love that you say that there's Jesus is documented. There's so much that tells us that he existed.
We mentioned
the man at the beginning.
Josephus.
Well, and then that brings us back to the beginning where you were saying that there's so much beyond the Bible that exists, that testifies. There's so many other documents that are not part of the Bible that were studied, though, just along with the Bible. Right?
Indeed. As a matter of fact, we could reconstruct most
valid.
of Christ's life using extra biblical sources. Is that right? Or much of it?
Well, we could certainly reconstruct what we learn in the Gospels from extra biblical sources.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. Well, I hear the music. That means we got to go. Jimmy Akin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jimmy Akin is senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. His book, the most recent one, Daily Defense, 365 Days plus one to becoming a better apologist. Erica Olson, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Find out all about us at Catholic.com. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Thanks to Radio Maria. We love being on Radio Maria. We'll see you next week on Catholic Answers Today.